Hello, good evening. Here are the IP Business Talks together with SEP. I'm very happy that you take the time to listen and to watch to us when we talk with somebody who, when you are on a regular basis on LinkedIn and when you're interested in IP, especially in this very interesting topic of standard essential patents, then this person you definitely know. It's Tim Pohlmann. I'm very happy that he's here, that I'm having here, and that he takes the time. He is also university lecturer in our certificate and diploma program at the IP Business Academy in Strasbourg at SEP. And we will talk today about obviously his topic. He has I would say, at least in Europe, the thought leadership on that point, and also on a global basis. He's the one you should talk about when it comes to SEPs, especially on the politics, on the development around this fascinating topic. And I would like to invite you to ask questions. The floor is open. You have the chat. So please ask questions to us via the chat, and I will integrate that in our discussion. So first of all, I now hand over to Tim, and would you be so nice, Tim, and explain a little bit about your background and especially your fascinating company and services, and to let the audience know a little bit who you are. And what is your service? What you're doing there in this SEP world?
Yes, thank you first of all for inviting me. Happy to be here, and also to the audience, happy to answer any question. Myself, I'm the founder and CEO of a company. It's called IPlytics, Intellectual Property Analytics, as the name says. And like many of us in the industry, of course, I didn't plan to found that company. I didn't plan to end up in IP. I studied business in Marburg, a very small town in the middle of Germany. And in my diploma thesis, I wanted to go a little bit in a bigger city, to put it that way. I wanted to go to Berlin. I applied for an internship at the Ministry of Economics and Technology. And there I got distributed to the Department of Patent Policy. Department of Patent Policy, and there I also found my thesis topic to write about how patents in universities or in academia can be basically used and commercialized. And of course, the German ministry has a program for that you can apply for money and apply your patents. So that was my diploma thesis. I extended that thesis to a whole PhD. I met Professor Blind here in Berlin. I wanted to do a PhD on patent information, to put it that way. And Professor Blind is known for being the professor of standards. So I had to extend my topic from patents, not only talking about patents per se, but also to talk about or to write about and research about the world of patents and standards. And the first thing I did when starting the PhD was writing a study for the European Commission. That was the first data-driven study back in 2009, where we pulled patent declarations from all the various sources and put them into statistics. And we wrote a report for the European Commission together with Professor Blind, Professor Rudy Beckers, all the well-known professors in the world of SEPs. And that's where I directly had handled that data. And I got excited, even though that sounds weird maybe, but I got excited. And many people were also excited about the results. I think that was one of the first times people put that data together. You can see trends, statistics. In 2009, that was all really very manual, you can imagine. And yeah, throughout the PhD, of course, I used more of that data, combined more of that analysis. And I became to learn that not only you can get great insights of combining patents and standards data, but also that not only academia, but even beyond the world, the business world, the intellectual property professionals find it very interesting and valuable to get access to the data, to get more info around it. Yeah, right after my PhD, that led me to found the company that I'm now CEO and founder of, IPlytics. where we basically created a software, an intelligence IP solution, I may say. We gather worldwide patent data and combine that and map that against technology standards like 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 5, video coding technologies, wireless charging standards. The list of standards subject to patents has been also largely increasing throughout the past years. The topic is, of course, with all the connectivity, Internet of Things, next industrial revolution becoming more popular. And yeah, our solution helps anyone in the space to understand how do patents map to standards, which of the patents are pooled in a pooled license, how do I get access as a licensee, how do I commercialize my patents as a licensor, how do I do portfolio management on standard essential assets, how do I litigate and understand, also situations where two parties are in discussions and may not find a solution yet. And we support that with data always. We are not a consultancy. We are really a product-driven company. We provide access to our data. We provide access to intelligent analyses. And that is our business since back then. And yeah, very international in all countries and areas. We have sales teams in Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, US, and of course also here in Europe.
Yeah, I mean that's the logic, right? That that I need that information to make decisions. I need that kind of information to start with negotiation, whatever. So who's owning what to a certain extent, and who is a part of the game, and who is in, who is out. I mean that's the interesting questions here. And what do you mean when you say you don't offer services? So you have a database and people can get access to that database. Is that correct?
That is very correct. So basically we assume that the user of our software is the expert. It's the subject matter expert. It's the person that is typically a portfolio manager, a patent attorney since years. I don't have to explain to them what 5G is. Typically, they know it in general. However, they may not.
That's the reason why they're in contact with you, right? So otherwise, somebody who don't know what 5G is wouldn't find IPlytics. That's
Yeah,
the point.
maybe, yeah, probably. Of course, we do explanations and we have all that, but in the end, what we want to do is those people may not know how to best handle data, or they don't have the time or the budget to do all this. So we explain the data to them. We explain limitations also. We are very transparent here. And then we train that person to handle data. And of course, with a software that is intelligent, that is intuitive, it is easy. It is not difficult. It takes 2-3 days of training, and they are experts of how to handle data. And we help and support with reports. We do all this, but not in a consultant manner. More, everything is very product centric. So it's around the product, it's around the data. It's always data driven.
I guess you are a perfect teacher, because you are the first one who tell me that after 2 or 3 days you are an expert in handling data. But that's a different issue. At least from a product perspective, people can work with it. And I mean, that's the most important thing, because we have overwhelming data out there, and data to a certain extent is meaningless. It's just data. So we have to find structures in it. We have to make conclusions out of that. And that's the cornerstone. Okay. So you mentioned 5G, Wi-Fi 6, whatever. So the overall topic here is interoperability, right? And within the context of Industry 4.0, simply people, I would say in former times, so when I was a kid and worked with my Commodore 64, we had a term which was compatibility. And compatibility meant that it doesn't take you 3 days, it takes you 2 days to bring data from one computer to the other, yeah, something like that. And today, when my little son he makes a picture on his Android mobile phone and send it to one of his friends, he even don't ask which kind of operating system is on that mobile phone, how he transfer it. He just use, I don't know, WhatsApp or whatever. And also the other guy don't know where that comes from, what is the format, what is the the way how the picture was created, whatever. Nobody knows anything. It's just, I want to have the data there, and you get it there. And I mean, that's interoperability, which is something much more than compatibility. And this is created by standards. And I would say 20 years ago, standards were not that critical. We had, of course, some industry standards. I mean, like the PC, IBM PC's architecture, something like that. But it was relatively an isolated effect to standardize something. But today, more and more industries I mean, when they don't get access to something like IoT or 5G, they are dead and will be dead. And so, what is your expectation? Because I mean, the communication standards so far were developed like LTE and UMTS. They were developed having in mind a mobile phone, a smartphone then, and they were used to improve the performance of smartphones. So now 5G is different in many ways. And can you explain us what is your expectation, where we will see the first applications and maybe therefore also the first battlefields of 5G issues?
Yes, no, very, very good introduction in that topic. I think standards are fundamental for the whole economy, not even in the future, even already today. I think not many people are even realizing how dependent we already are on standards. And sometimes also people don't really realize that standards also in, what we think the connected vehicle of the future, the connected vehicle, it has been there since 10 years. I remember the first time when I was here in Berlin using car sharing, opening the car with my smartphone. That was 6-7 years ago. It's this is old technology. I'm sending a signal to the base station, back to the car opens, identifies me as the legal, person that is allowed to drive that car. And that is, of course, not a technology necessarily that depends on 5G. It's a very simple signal sending back and forth. However, think about the car in the near future, in the next 3-4 years, that has a sensor that controls the wire pressure, a sensor that controls your steering, understanding that you may have like a beer too much. That data is instantly sent to the cloud, understood that your driving behavior may not be correct, sent to the whole data system, and then informs other drivers instantly that something is wrong, that your tire is flat, that your driving behavior is not normal, and that without any delay or any. And we will have these sensors, these kind of sensors. We will have thousands, maybe millions of sensors in a car, and also we will have, of course, the demand once the car is autonomously driving, that we have everything that we have now in a phone also in a car. So this live session here, why wouldn't I be driving right now, right? I don't want any latency. I don't want this best quality, all that expectations, that is only possible through a bandwidth, that 5G offers, to latency that 5G offers. So here we need an upgrade from 4G. Or think about the factory of the future with all the different sensors of the machines. We already have some sensors in the factories, but every single screw you can identify and have an idea of that screw in the internet. So the more data we have, the more information we basically process back and forth, the more important it becomes to have a very strong standard that can support that, right? And I think it will be just a matter of the next 2-3 years when more and more 5G will be deployed beyond the smartphone world, in cars.
Did I get you right when you say that the tendency to autonomous driving is one of the driving forces for 5G? Because to be honest, I don't need 5G for the moment on my smartphone, because when I want to watch videos or whatever. So I had a wonderful discussion with some standard essential patent holders, because I'm involved in that valuation thing then when we are in front of the jury. And there was one question was for what we need data compression for 4K, data compression for 4K videos on smartphones. Because I mean, when you have HD, it's enough for a screen like that. Right. But obviously, we will see other technologies like projecting something, out of my smartphone to a big size, and then you need the data, and then you need the compression. So it's like always that we have the problem, we cannot understand, or we cannot imagine which kind of applications might be possible based on that availability of standards. So I remember the time when UMTS auction was here in Germany, and I asked myself, what should I ever do with UMTS? Right. For what is that needed? Yeah. And I mean, 2-3 years later, it was, not acceptable, don't have 3G. Right. Okay, so and you think that that the autonomous driving is one of the key driving forces to implement 5G?
It is one for one industry. I think. I think the applications are countless. I think autonomous driving is one that is often used, of course, because we all like to think of it. It sounds like very interesting that a car drives by itself. But also we have to be honest here. There might be autonomous driving applications that work with a camera. They don't even need connectivity, right? So it's not all that always. But I am very sure that connectivity will be a large part of those new applications. I think in general, we all will be tending to communicate more. Information is what our economy is driven by. The more, and the more important that will become, the more important also the next generation of standards will be. And as you said, sometimes at the beginning of a new technology revolution, you don't even realize that in 3-4 years' time, you cannot live without it. When I first studied back in Marburg, the first iPhone came to the market. That's not long ago, right? I mean, I remember, why do I need such a big screen, right? People may not imagine then that there's a whole app store coming, and then you have applications suddenly from independent. Those are developments that are sometimes hard to predict, but I think everyone agrees that we will have similar scenarios in the future coming up like this, where everything will be heavily dependent on information transferred from A to B, right? It's as simple as that.
I would summarize that one cornerstone here is that not anymore people communicate with each other, that we see machine-to-machine communication 24 hours. And that makes a tremendous difference, because even when I try to talk a lot, I cannot produce 24 hours data for communication, but machines can do that. And when I have hundreds or thousands of sensors in even one car, we have enormous data which is produced. I mean, that's some cornerstones of difference of the next generation of technology. But that leads me to another question, which people are, let's say, at least confused when they hear that for GSM we had around 150 patents, and then UMTS, the standard essential patents, around 1,300. Then LTE came up with 4,500 maybe, and then now we have that, I don't know, you know the figures better than I do, around 35,000 standard essential declared patents. So what is that? This is not a standard. This is a monster. Yeah, it's a beast. And can you explain a little bit why that happens, and what is the motivation of companies? But because obviously, I mean, 35,000 patents do not come up on occasion. So we see a dedicated development and filing procedures. I mean, there are papers out there, scientific papers, which explain us that every time when a meeting of that standard committees were, that short before they start to file patents, to make sure that they can negotiate in the right way, that the standard goes into the direction of the patent. Right. Can you explain that a little bit? What's behind that curtains? What are the motivations of that behavior?
I mean, I think the market also very much changed. Thinking about back the days of GSM, UMTS, we had 3, 4, 5 companies that were responsible for developing the standard. Those companies were not, I mean, they were in competition, but it was more like a gentleman's agreement. There was not much licensing going on. These days, on our software, for example, we count over 100 independent patent owners that claim at least to own essential patents through their declaration statements. We have, much more players in the market. And another figure that is interesting is the contributions submitted to the standards meetings are 3 times as high compared 4G to 5G, which already also tells you that there's a lot more work put in for the 5G standard than in earlier generations. I think also, of course, the licensing of SEPs is a very lucrative market. We should not ignore that. Many companies made already billions of dollars through licensing SEPs. There are multiple examples out there. And then thinking about what we just talked about 5 minutes ago, that we even believe that the value of 5G will be much higher than 4G because applications go beyond just smartphones. And if that is true, if all industry verticals will use 5G as heavily as the smartphone world does, we can easily imagine that the value and the potential licensing income might be increasing as well to these extents. So there are a lot of companies that have a very strategic interest now in being, part of that lucrative market, getting some shares of the cake, getting their share of it. And of course, filing patents is the way to do it. I think also companies became a lot more professional. We see that with our customers. What you just talked about, it's this paper called Just-in-Time Inventions. And that really is what's happening these days. We have companies that have an invention, like in any other company, you have an R&D department, you have an invention disclosure to your internal patent board. But what is part of that patent board these days at these companies is directly the standardization experts who say, oh, this could become a standard essential patent. So we have to be careful that the contributions submitted, are submitted after we already filed a provisional or priority application at the office. Very strategically, those filings happen in parallel or just in time before the meeting. And then following up the standard, who is developing, right? We don't have, and I think some people think we have a 5G standard and that's it. No, we have a first version of a standard. Every month those guys are meeting and we have another version, adding more technology and adding more patents to it. And and that development of the technology development of the standard, you have to make sure that your patent and your claims relate to it. And you of course need your patents in the end, your claims, to relate to the final version of the standard that is then implemented by all the smartphones, and in the future also other applications in IoT where patents and standards matter. So that became a lot more professional than before. And I think that is also a reason why we have this enormous increase in patents. While of course we also have to say that these databases of potentially essential patents have been also a little bit, some people call it over declaration. I don't like that word very much because in the end it's a friend obligation to declare anything that potentially could be essential. But thinking only about declaration data, I mean, maybe the increase is a little bit, inflated by that. But still, I think standards contributions, for example, another topic, we do see a similar behavior. So I think there's some truth in it.
Yeah, and at the end, as you said, the standards become more and more complex. They become more and more powerful in terms of what you can do with that. And that means more and more technology is in it, because we know now how important these standards are to make use cases happen, and therefore it's obviously that we need more patents in terms of more technology. And as you said, I like that very much, that the companies become more and more professional in how to deal with it, how to deal with patents in relation to technology. In terms of, a patent is not technology. A patent is a patent, and a standard is a standard, and technology is a technology. So I have 3 aspects which I have to bring together. And first of all, I have a standard in terms of this is fixed, yeah, and then I have a realization of that this is technology, and in between I have a patent which can be standard essential or not, and can be infringed or not. That's a completely, yeah, not completely, but to a certain extent separated issue. and
Yeah.
yeah, thankful to your work and your database. I mean, we have a certain transparency on that. Is there something else available? So I'm not aware that anybody is doing the work you're doing to bring these different sources together. Is that right?
I mean, there are companies now that also do this. Of course, I think we have been the pioneers. I may want to say that, being the first mover here. But of course, since the market of 5G and licensing and all that became lucrative, and people more and more requested analysis and data on it, also other IP solution providers do this now. But still, since we have been the first movers, I think we are still the most advanced ones. And it's, of course, more than just providing data. It's, of course, as we know, patents are declared. They are self-declared. They are not verified as central. So the next generation also of our solution, will show how likely those patents are really essential. How do I, with data, map claims to sections of standards semantically, giving me an indication, is that very likely essential or not, right?
Yeah, I got you.
A lot of work done right now with subject matter experts, very expensive, often economically not even feasible to employ someone to do all this. And that's where we support and will be supporting more and more in the future.
Okay.
With our solution.
So when we have now the situation that we have already talked about that 5G as one of the examples goes out of the smartphone. So these communication standards were developed for a very small technological application in terms of having an edge. So today we call it edge device, but it was former days a phone call, a phone, and then a smartphone. And so we have this cell phone, and we have certain apps on it, and but we have a limited computer power, limited application use cases, and but 5G is not anymore about that application per se. So it says it is it goes into the direction of IoT, the Internet of Everything, of things. So things communicate with each other, and that means we have much more use cases and also much more industry which are affected in terms of everything where you can put smart in front of it. Smart home, smart manufacturing, smart grid. The point is what we saw in the 90s, early 2000s are these mobile wars, these patent heavy big patent disputes, but they were very located. I would say not so many people even know about it, because it was a SEP holder against a telecommunication company. So today, I would say 5G and the interoperability is so essential that it is a license to play, much more than just make a product a little bit better. So you can say tomorrow when a bicycle, a chair, a window, whatever, cannot communicate, cannot have a certain intrinsic intelligence, and is not in a certain way smart, we will call it stupid, because the customers will expect a certain smartness of objects. And that makes the SEPs even more important, because when you have no access to that, and I mean, that's the European Commission which said that, and that are these friend obligations that we say, okay, from a political framework, we promote making standards, otherwise we go nowhere. On the other hand, people have to have access to that, so they have to pay for it, but we have to handle how they can get access. But before we have disputes, we have to have a smooth licensing environment. So what would you say about the way how we can this is a giant licensing program which we need for industries which are I would say not very used first in terms of professionalism in working with IP. And second, they are not used to take licenses. So that's a very limited bunch of people who know how to work with it. And now nearly every industry. So for example, I'm working with Rastal, so they make glasses, yeah, a beer glass, and this beer glass is a radio glass, so it's communicating. So everything will start to communicate, and that means we need a very powerful and very smooth licensing program. So how do you see that? How can we come to that? Because so far we don't have it. We are far away from that.
Right. No, we are far away. And I think already with the auto industry, we saw that clash of cultures, the disputes between auto manufacturers that suddenly had to pay for patents they use in their cars. And that dispute has been going on for the past 10 years, earlier this week, resolved, at least with one litigation. But still, I think these were the first disputes, and there will be more. I think on the other hand, we also have to consider the economics behind it. Even for a car in these pools, I think, for 2G, 3G, 4G, as a stack already, you pay $15 per car. And there are far less cars than smartphones in this world. But then think about something like a smart meter, where the cost of the smart meter itself may be just a few $10 or $20. So also the pricing has to be in a reasonable manner to the different applications. Or let's say the beer glass, I'm sure is in production, whereas maybe even cents. So adding a license on top of that has to be a share of cents. And in some cases, as you said, it would need huge licensing programs, but they have to be somehow economically feasible, because no one wants to have lawyers in front of a court and paying a lot of money in the end for getting a cent per glass, or that is not going to happen. So I think both sides of the table need to find a solution here. I think the patent owners, they want, of course, and I think that also makes sense, some return on their investment. I think especially if everything is dependent on this highly innovative standard, we also want those companies in the future to invest in that standard to make it even better. And we benefit, everyone benefits from that. On the other hand, of course, you have to ask for pricing that makes sense for the user. And those companies will need to make economically, also reasonable, you shouldn't destroy the market, right? And I think that is also, again, should be in the interest of the licensor to do that. And I think, to me, the only solution in the end will be a simple system. It may not be 100% understood. Like in cars, you pay for the 5G license the same, no matter if you're driving the Porsche or your Fiat Cinquecento, right? The car price will not matter. So of course, for that small car, it seems a little more expensive compared to the expensive car, but it's just too difficult sometimes, and not, making complex systems. So the solutions have to be simple. I think patent pools will or must be a solution, or somehow an aggregation of licensors and also maybe licensees. We do see also defensive aggregation in the market, which also makes sense. Why would every little smart device manufacturer has to negotiate licensing? Think about the Berlin startup with the smartwatch. Why would they don't even have a legal position in their team? No one understands patents in the team. Maybe they may not even have their own patents. So there must be something that aggregates all that. So, it's all efficient and someone gets a share of something somewhere at some point of time. But it will come later. I think first, everyone will have to use 5G. Like, licensing is always typically the second step. So we will see companies implementing 5G, using 5G, being part of a product. And only if that picks up, the people that want a license royalty for it will knock on doors, I guess.
I mean, what happens today is that then when even under friend conditions, when these two parties they negotiate, and at the end they fight, and they don't agree on the offers from the other side, and then the lawyers come in and things become very expensive. And we always talk about one patent. Yeah, that's the next funny thing. That's these one standard essential patents. Imagine what happens with 33,000. So it's unbelievable. But what happens is then that sooner or later they come to guys like me and they say, okay, now what is the value? Okay, because we have to pay, and I want to know what is now a reasonable friend royalty for this and that patent within this and that standard. Okay, and so then guys like me start and say, yeah, it's complex. Okay, and complex means it's expensive in terms of we writing that kind of reports to convince judges that this is the right perspective on the value here. And I mean, as long as we talked about smartphones and an enhancement of the functionality in terms of customer benefits of smartphones, I like the idea of having a certain, let's say, a price premium. So a smarter smartphone can be sold at a higher price than a not so smart smartphone. Okay, yeah. And so there is a certain willingness to pay, and I can accept that when we want to determine the reasonable price for the license, we come from the willingness to pay from customers. But there's a paper out there, and one of my PhDs is now working on that concept, and I like that pretty much. Where Professor An here from the Technical University of Munich, he's arguing that more and more connectivity becomes a commodity. Okay, like electrical energy, like water, and what you're doing is you pay for that a certain regulated price and on cost base, and then a certain plus to make sure that the inventors get an incentive to make the next invention. But it is the opposite discussion. It's the cost for an infrastructure and not an additional benefit which comes out because my glass is now connected with my smartphone. What do you think about that a price definition based on costs, like for an infrastructure, despite of or in contrast to a customer benefit, a premium price discussion when it comes to friend licenses for SEPs?
Yeah, I think in the end, it really also, like always, depends on the use case, because I mean, I do understand that approach of that infrastructure. As you said, if you want to play, you only can play if you have, let's say, 5G. Otherwise, you're out of the game. And then the standard is the gatekeeper of the whole, industry. And in that case, of course, we have to somehow discuss what that means. Also, of course, there's a very monopolistic position then for that standard. While sometimes I think also these days, all these use cases are discussed. And I recently talked to the Robert Bosch home appliance IP director. And he said, why would a refrigerator need 5G? If you have Wi-Fi, why would you need, not going to take the refrigerator out and I still need connectivity. So sometimes use cases may not even be beyond those things. And even if it uses Wi-Fi, what can a refrigerator do with connectivity, right? Right now, maybe you can have a picture of the inside. So in grocery shopping, you know what you have. I don't have milk. Okay. I think in those cases, I think the premium is to me, if you want this nice gadget, pay for it. And I think also the automotive industry thinks that way. In the future, if you want a fully connected car, the customers pay for it, right? Not us. But I think when we go further in this, and everything is connected, and this is, as you said, a commodity. Maybe then we have to think about other ways of evaluating this. In other ways, I think it's an interesting idea. I have to be honest, put more thought in it to have a more qualified answer. But in the end, I think also this could be maybe a simpler idea that may make things happen, or allow licensing in a more simple. Because if you want to get an estimation of a premium, again, that is also not always an easy task, especially when it becomes.
Absolutely. Especially when there is no premium. Okay. When the customers simply say, I don't buy when it is not connected because I simply expect. So when we come to that point that customers don't react when you write on it, it's 5G connected, as you said with the refrigerator. So I give a piece of shit for this refrigerator. I don't need it. That's all. But we will come to that point that every window, every object will have a certain intrinsic smartness. At least that the refrigerator tells me that something which in it is rotten or something like that. Yeah, so then I like it. Or when the refrigerator tells me what I can cook based on what is in it, yeah, something like that, it will become interesting. And when this is only can happen when the data comes into the cloud, what is in the refrigerator, to calculate the next recipe for your Thermomix. I don't know what. Okay, but at the end, when customers start simply to expect connectivity and not are willing to, so they just ignore the product and go to the connected ones, and not connected are simply not sellable, then we are at the point that it is a commodity. And I would assume that especially outside of smartphones, that will happen very soon, and then we will need a new way of calculate that prices. I mean, that's obvious. You mentioned already these pools. I mean, can you explain a little bit what so we have 4 minutes left, yeah? So don't explain it in too much detail, but what a pool is and what you think. What a pool, the role of pools within that aspect of an framework of smooth licensing for SEPs.
I mean, in the end, a pool is an aggregation of patent ownership. Imagine different patent owners want to license out. Let's say for 5G, we have 100 companies that own 5G SEPs. And I'm that smartphone manufacturer, or maybe that's even that startup from Berlin with a smartwatch. So I have to knock on 100 doors to get access to 5G, and that is, of course, inefficient, right? So in a patent pool scenario, all these 100 patent owners would put all their patents in one pool. So I have one contract. We call that the one stop. So it makes life a lot more easier because I go to this one third entity that aggregates the 100 patent owners in one contract. I sign the contract and I'm good to go. That in theory, that is how a patent pool works. And I think, as I said before, we can also think it the other way around. I own a patent. I want to license out, and I have all these hundreds of smartphone manufacturers. I also don't want to chase 100 smartphone manufacturers, and also they could aggregate, let's say, in an industry consortia, as we are the smartphone manufacturers. Do we need access to your patent? And yes, you do. And then they provide access. So I think aggregation on both sides of the table, especially in the future, where it's not like today we have 10 smartphone manufacturers and it's you know who to talk to, right? But in the future, you may not even know who to talk to. You cannot pay attention of all these companies that may use 5G. And especially in those situations, we need aggregation in the market, both patent owners and both those that need access to the patents.
Okay, got you. So, but that is even more an argument into the direction of infrastructure commodity. That simply, let's say, an association takes care for their industry, that it's a service for an industry association to make sure that the members of that association have access to all the vital patents for them, for example, these kind of standards. I mean, that's a scenario that makes absolutely sense, that we have a next level structure on top of that industries or of countries or whatever, which simply makes sense that access to these vital technologies is available. Okay, yeah. So for the moment, I think there are many other questions which I would like to ask you and to talk about standards and SAPs. For today, I thank you very much for taking the time. So thank you for your questions, but it was so dense I had no chance to come up with that. So Tim told me that he will be available in our after show party on LinkedIn. So take your glass of wine or your beer and join us there. We will try to we'll try to answer and also to discuss with you. So thank you very much for attending our IP business talk today. And we are happy when you follow us on LinkedIn and when you come to us for the next talk. Tim, thank you very much to you for taking the time, for giving us your expertise here. And thank you very much for supporting us in the IP Business Academy.
Thanks for having me, and it was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.